In the quiet hush of an old seaside house, where waves whisper forgotten tales against weathered cliffs, a young woman named Harper Ellis inherits not just bricks and memories, but a hidden truth etched into the very walls. A truth that promises to unravel the lies of her past and awaken the forgiveness she never knew she needed. What secrets lie waiting in the shadows, ready to change everything she thought she knew about family, betrayal, and redemption? Before we begin, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Rain tapped softly against the tall library windows, a steady, patient rhythm that filled the empty reading room with quiet company. The overhead lights had already been dimmed. Only the small desk lamp beside Harper remained on, casting a warm amber pool over the worn wooden table. Harper Ellis sat alone, 28 years old, slight shoulders bent forward. She wore her usual light gray cardigan that hung loosely over a plain white t-shirt, faded blue jeans, and comfortable brown leather flats that had carried her through countless shifts. Her shoulder-length brown hair was gathered in a low, simple ponytail. Thin wire-framed glasses rested on her nose. Fair skin, tired eyes that often looked older than her years. She held an old hardcover book against her chest, an edition of The Wind in the Willows with yellowed pages and a cracked spine. It had been her mother's. Every few minutes she opened it, not really reading, just breathing in the faint scent of aged paper and long-ago evenings. When she was small, her mother would read to her on the window seat at Crestwood Haven, while rain drummed the glass just like tonight. Those were the only times Harper ever felt completely safe. After her mother's death, the house grew colder. Her father, Thomas Langston, became a distant figure who traveled constantly. Then Evelyn arrived, bringing her daughter Isabella. The house filled with new voices, new rules, new perfumes Harper never liked. She learned quickly how to disappear. Stay in her room, stay quiet, stay invisible. The library became her real home. She turned another page without seeing the words. Her mind drifted to the funeral she had not attended 2 days earlier. She had told herself she had too many returns to process, too many overdue notices to send. The truth was simpler and heavier. She did not know how to stand among those people and pretend she belonged. The old wall clock ticked toward 9:30. A soft creak came from the front desk. Mrs. Delaney, the head librarian, 73, silver hair pinned in a loose bun, cardigan almost the same shade as Harper's, walked slowly between the stacks carrying a chipped mug of chamomile tea. She set it down beside Harper without a word, then rested a thin, spotted hand briefly on the girl's shoulder. No questions. Just the small, steady pressure of someone who had watched Harper grow from a shy teenager into this quiet, careful woman. Harper covered Mrs. Delaney's hand with her own for a moment. Neither spoke. The rain kept falling. Then her phone vibrated against the table. Sharp, unwelcome. The name on the screen read, Theodore Pembroke, Esquire. Harper stared at it for 4 rings before she answered. Miss Ellis. The lawyer's voice was dry, precise, tired. I trust you received my earlier message. The reading of Mr. Langston's will is scheduled for 10 o'clock tomorrow morning at the family residence. Your presence is expected. A long silence. I'll be there, she said quietly. She ended the call before he could say anything else. She looked down at the book again. Her thumb traced the embossed title on the cover. She remembered her mother's voice reading about mole and rat and the wide, safe river. She remembered how, even when her father was home, he rarely looked up from his papers. She remembered the day Evelyn first walked through the front door wearing a green silk dress and a smile that never reached her eyes. She remembered Isabella, 14 then, standing behind her mother, already tall, already certain she was meant to be seen. 20 years of being the extra person in someone else's photograph. Harper closed the book gently. She stood, switched off the desk lamp. The room fell into soft shadows broken only by the blue glow of the exit sign. She pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders and walked toward the door. At the threshold, she paused, looked back at the empty chairs, the silent shelves. She thought of Mrs. Delaney locking up alone, of the rain that would continue long after she was gone, of the big stone house on the coast she had not entered in more than a decade. Tomorrow she would go, not because she wanted to claim anything, but because some small, stubborn part of her still hoped there might be one last thing left to say, something that could explain why she had been left outside the circle for so long. She stepped out into the wet night. The door closed behind her with a soft, final click. The morning arrived under a low gray sky, the kind that holds its breath before deciding to weep. Crestwood Haven stood at the end of the long coastal drive, its stone walls darkened by years of salt air and neglect. Inside the library, the air smelled of old varnish and dust, the kind that settles into everything and refuses to leave. Harper stepped through the heavy oak doors a few minutes past 10. Her cardigan was still damp from the mist outside. Her flats left faint wet prints on the marble floor. She kept her eyes down at first, feeling the room shift around her like water closing over a stone. The high-backed chairs were occupied by people she had once called family. Evelyn Langston sat straight, 61 years old, in her emerald green sheath dress that caught the weak light from the windows. Her silver blonde hair was softly waved, her face composed, but her eyes, sharp, watchful, flicked toward the door with the smallest tightening of the mouth. Isabella stood beside her, 35, tall and certain, black blazer sharp as a blade, dark hair in a sleek bun. Her posture said she already knew what was coming. Theodore Pembroke, the family lawyer for 40 years, waited behind the wide mahogany desk. 72, thin silver hair combed back, wire-rimmed glasses, a voice like dry leaves underfoot. He had known Harper since she was small enough to hide behind her father's legs. He looked at her now with something almost like apology in his faded blue eyes. Harper took the last empty chair. No one spoke to her. The silence was thick, broken only by the distant crash of waves against the rocks below. Theodore cleared his throat and began. Isabella received the Langston Shipping Corporation. Hundreds of millions in value. The investment portfolios, the properties scattered across Europe. Evelyn was granted the city house and a generous trust. The words fell like stones into still water. Harper listened, waiting for her name. When it came, the room seemed to hold its breath. To my daughter, Harper Ellis, Thomas had written, I leave Crestwood Haven with all its furnishings and contents, together with the items in safety deposit box 528 at First Coastal Bank. A ripple of disbelief moved through the room. Isabella's laugh was short, sharp. A crumbling house on the cliff? That's all? Evelyn placed a hand on her daughter's arm, a gesture meant to calm but carrying its own quiet triumph. Harper felt the familiar weight settle in her chest, the old familiar ache of being overlooked. Yet something else stirred beneath it. Small and unfamiliar. Curiosity. Theodore paused. He reached into his leather portfolio and withdrew a plain white envelope, yellowed at the edges. This was to be given to you alone, Miss Ellis. Your father's instructions were clear. Harper took it with steady hands. Inside was a small brass key and a single sheet of paper in Thomas's angular hand. Harper, forgive me. The truth is in the walls. T.L. She folded it carefully, slipped it into her pocket. No one asked what it said. No one seemed to care. Later, in the quiet of the bank vault, Harper stood alone before box 528. The key turned with a soft click. Inside lay a small bundle, a few old photographs, a leather journal she did not recognize, and a single folded letter in her mother's elegant script. My dearest girl, if your father has not told you, look in the wall we loved best, the one where we painted together. Keep it safe. Keep it yours. Harper's fingers trembled as she touched the paper. She could almost hear her mother's voice again, soft and steady, reading stories in the upstairs room with the sea view. The wall with the loose brick, the one they had pretended was a secret door. She had not thought of it in years. She closed the box, the key heavy in her palm. The vault lights hummed overhead. For the first time in a long while, she felt something more than absence. She felt possibility. She walked out into the afternoon light, the sea wind carrying salt and promise. The house waited. The walls waited. And somewhere in the quiet spaces between what had been said and what had never been said, a door she had thought forever closed began to open. She would go back, not for the house itself, but for the chance to hear, at last, what her parents had never quite known how to tell her. 3 months had slipped by like fog over the water. The coastal wind still carried the same salt and memory, But now it tugged at Harper as she stood outside the county courthouse, the stone steps cool under her flats. Autumn leaves skittered across the pavement in small, restless circles. The sky was the color of old pewter. Inside courtroom 4B, the air smelled of polished oak and faint coffee. Harper sat at the small table beside Lauren Hayes. Lauren was 33, fair-skinned, medium-length black hair tied low, square-framed glasses that slipped slightly when she spoke. Her light gray suit was well cut, but not expensive. It spoke of long nights and student loans still unpaid. Her voice was steady, earnest, the kind that carried quiet conviction even when her hands trembled just a little on the yellow legal pad. Across the aisle, Isabella sat beside Connor Reed. Connor was 41, tall and lean, salt and pepper hair cropped close, a neatly trimmed beard framing a jaw that had seen too many courtrooms. His navy suit was immaculate, his cufflinks catching the overhead light. His eyes, sharp, calculating, moved over Harper with the detached interest of a man who had already decided the outcome. He spoke in a low, measured baritone that filled the room without effort. Judge Victoria Sterling presided from the bench. 58, silver hair pulled into a neat chignon, her black robe hanging like a mantle of quiet authority. Her gaze was direct, kind, but unyielding, the eyes of someone who had heard every version of truth and still believed in listening. The gavel fell once, soft, final. Connor rose. He adjusted his tie, a small, deliberate motion. Then he began. "Your Honor," he said, "this case is not complicated. Thomas Langston, in his final months, was a man whose mind had begun to wander. Confusion, forgetfulness, moments of disorientation documented by his physician. Into that vulnerability stepped Harper Ellis, a daughter who had been absent for 20 years. No visits, no calls, no birthday cards. She reappeared only when the end drew near, offering comfort that had never existed before. And in return, she received a house no one else wanted and access to a box no one else knew about. We submit this was not love. This was opportunity." Harper felt the words land like cold rain. She kept her hands folded in her lap, fingers laced tight. She had expected this. Still, hearing it spoken aloud in this formal room made the old wound ache fresh. 20 years. She had counted them once in the quiet hours after her mother died. 20 birthdays alone. 20 Christmases with a single card from her father, always late, always signed with just his initials. She had told herself it was his work, his distance, his grief. Now those years were being shaped into something else. Abandonment, selfishness, greed. Lauren stood next. Her voice was softer, but it carried. "Your Honor, the evidence will show Mr. Langston was of sound mind. Medical records will confirm clarity of thought." Harper Ellis had no contact with her father during the period in question. What she received was not seized. It was given by a man who, at the end, wished to speak truths he could not speak sooner. Harper looked at the grain of the table. She thought of the envelope still in her dresser drawer, the key beside it. She thought of the house waiting on the cliff, its walls holding whatever her father had been too ashamed or too broken to say aloud. She had not gone back yet. Not because she feared what she might find, but because she feared what she might feel. The judge asked a few questions. Connor answered smoothly. Lauren answered carefully. Harper said nothing. She was not called to speak today, but she listened. And in the listening, something shifted inside her. Not anger, not yet. Something quieter. A resolve she had not known she possessed. She would not let this story be rewritten by strangers in expensive suits. She would stand in it. Small, plain, but present. When the session ended, the room emptied slowly. Isabella passed close enough that Harper caught the scent of her perfume. Something sharp and expensive. Their eyes met for half a second. Isabella's gaze held triumph edged with something else. Uncertainty, perhaps, or fear. Harper walked out into the pale afternoon light. The wind had picked up. Leaves swirled around her ankles. She pulled her cardigan tighter and looked toward the sea. Invisible from here, but always there. Always patient. She would fight. Not for the house. Not for the money. but for the right to hear her father's final words without them being drowned out by other voices. She took one long breath, then another. The air tasted of salt and coming rain. She started down the steps, one foot in front of the other. Winter light slanted through the tall courthouse windows, pale and thin, the kind that makes long shadows on marble floors. The air inside carried the scent of waxed wood and old paper, a smell that had settled into Harper's clothes over the weeks. Outside, the wind off the coast had turned colder, rattling the bare branches against the glass. The courtroom had grown familiar in its discomfort. Day after day, Connor Reed called witnesses who spoke in careful, practiced sentences. A society friend who remembered Thomas as distracted in his last year. A doctor who nodded solemnly and spoke of cognitive decline. Each word painted Harper as a ghost who had drifted in only when the fortune appeared. She sat straight, hands folded, listening to the portrait they drew. The absent daughter, the opportunist, the one who never came home. The words stung, but they did not surprise her. She had lived with their echo for most of her life. During the afternoon recess, the hallway outside the courtroom was quiet except for the soft click of heels on stone. Isabella stepped into her path. She wore her black blazer like armor, but her eyes, usually so certain, held a flicker Harper had never seen before. Her voice when she spoke was low, almost trembling. 50,000, Isabella said. Cash. Walk away. The house is worthless anyway. You know it, I know it. Take the money and go back to your books. Harper looked at her half-sister. The offer hung between them like smoke. Isabella's fingers twisted the strap of her purse. Her breath came a little too quickly when she mentioned Crestwood Haven. It was not greed in her eyes, it was fear. Something about the house frightened her. Harper felt the realization settle quietly inside her chest, like a stone finding its place at the bottom of a stream. She shook her head once. No, she said softly. Isabella's mouth tightened, but she said nothing more. She turned and walked away, heels echoing down the corridor. Later, as the session ended and people filed out, Harper lingered near the side exit. The crowd thinned. She was pulling on her coat when a voice spoke behind her, familiar, rough around the edges, warm in a way she had not expected. Harper? She turned. Alex stood there, 30 years old now, taller than she remembered, dark brown hair tousled by the wind, a worn leather jacket over a gray t-shirt. His face had the look of someone who had seen too many late nights, but his eyes, clear, steady, still held the same quiet kindness from the summers they had spent running along the beach below Crestwood Haven. He carried himself with the easy confidence of a man who had chosen his own path, no longer bound by anyone else's expectations. They had been children together. He had been the boy who climbed the rocks with her, who listened when she talked about her mother's stories. After her mother died, he had moved away with his family. She had not seen him in 15 years. I heard about the case, he said. His voice was low, careful. I'm a private investigator now. Mostly small jobs. But when I saw your name in the court filings, I came. Harper felt something loosen inside her. Not trust. Not yet. But the possibility of it. She looked at him for a long moment. The hallway lights buzzed overhead. Footsteps faded in the distance. My mother, Alex continued, used to say your mom looked worried whenever Evelyn was around. Like she was guarding something. I never understood it then. Maybe I do now. Harper swallowed. She thought of the letter in her dresser drawer, the key beside it, the wall her mother had mentioned. She had not returned to the house yet. The thought of walking those empty rooms alone had felt too heavy. But standing here with Alex watching her without judgment, the weight seemed shared. I don't know if I can do this, she said quietly. You don't have to do it alone, he answered. A small pause. The wind outside pushed against the windows. She nodded once. Okay. They walked out together into the late afternoon. The sky had cleared just enough for a sliver of pale sun to touch the steps. Harper felt the cold air on her face, sharp and clean. She thought of her father's note, of her mother's letter, of the house that waited with its secrets. For the first time, the path ahead did not feel entirely solitary. She would go back, with help, with questions, with the quiet hope that some truths once spoken might finally let the old wounds begin to close. Sunlight filtered through the courtroom blinds in thin, wavering stripes, casting long shadows on the wooden benches. The air held the faint must of old files and polished oak, a quiet space where truths came to rest or unravel. Spring had arrived, but the wind outside still whispered of winter's reluctance to leave. Lauren stood before the judge, her voice clear but soft. "We call Margaret Donovan to the stand." Margaret walked forward, 74 years old, her silver hair pinned neatly back, a simple pearl necklace against her gray wool suit. Her steps were measured, her eyes, pale blue, steady, carried the weight of decades spent sifting words and intentions. She had been Thomas's lawyer for 42 years, a woman who had seen families mend and break in equal measure. Her voice, when she swore the oath, was firm, carrying the quiet authority of someone who had learned patience from loss. Margaret settled into the witness box. Connor Reed watched her closely, his beard trimmed neat, but his eyes held a flicker of unease. Margaret spoke evenly. "Thomas Langston was of sound mind when he drafted his final will, clearer than I'd seen him in years, purposeful, determined." She paused, her fingers tracing the edge of the wooden rail. "He brought a box of letters to my office 8 months before he passed, spent hours explaining what he wanted. He insisted Harper receive Crestwood Haven, said she deserved the truth and Isabella must never know it." The courtroom grew still. Harper felt her breath catch. She sat there, hands in her lap, the cardigan soft against her skin. For so long, she had believed her father's silence was indifference. Now, through Margaret's words, she glimpsed something else. Regret. A man trying, at the end, to right what he could not fix sooner. The judge leaned forward, her chignon catching the light. "These letters. Submit them as evidence by morning." Connor objected, but the gavel fell softly, sealing the moment. Harper looked at Margaret. The older woman's gaze met hers for a brief second. Kind, knowing. It was as if she understood the quiet storms that raged in families like this. Harper felt a small warmth unfold inside her, like sunlight touching cold earth after frost. That evening, with Alex beside her, Harper drove the winding road to Crestwood Haven. The sea air slipped through the cracked car window, salty and sharp. Alex glanced at her now and then, his tousled hair catching the fading light, his hands steady on the wheel. They had talked little on the way, but his presence was a quiet anchor. The house loomed dark against the dusk. Inside, the air was stale, dust motes dancing in their flashlight beams. Harper's flats echoed on the wooden floors. Upstairs in her old room, she saw the signs. Drawers pulled open, floorboards pried loose, walls scratched in hurried searches. Someone had been here, desperate, careless. Isabella, perhaps? Or someone she had sent. Harper knelt by the fireplace, the loose brick her mother had shown her years ago, the one they called their secret. Her fingers found the edge. It gave way with a soft scrape. Inside the hollow space, a bundle wrapped in faded cloth. Letters, photographs, a small tape recorder. Her mother's handwriting on the top envelope. For Harper, when the time comes. She sat back on her heels, the bundle in her lap. Alex stood quietly in the doorway, not pressing, just there. The room smelled of old wood and sea salt. Harper thought of her mother's voice, reading stories by this very fire. She thought of her father's final note. The truth is in the walls. She had come seeking answers, fearing pain. Instead, she found a bridge, fragile but real, spanning the years of silence. Tears came then. Quiet ones. Not from sorrow alone, but from the gentle ache of understanding. Her parents had loved her in their broken ways, protected her with secrets they could not share. Downstairs as they left, the wind sighed through the eaves. Harper locked the door behind them. The stars were emerging, faint against the darkening sky. She slipped the bundle into her bag. Tomorrow the letters would go to the court. But tonight she held them close. She would read them slowly, let them speak. And in that speaking, perhaps, find the forgiveness her father had asked for. and the strength to offer it back. She turned to Alex. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded. Nothing more needed. They drove away in silence. The road curved toward town, the sea murmuring below. Harper felt lighter, as if a long-carried shadow had begun to lift. She would face what came next, with truth as her guide, with grace as her companion. The courtroom sat hushed under the weight of late spring light, soft and golden, slanting through high windows onto rows of polished benches. Dust drifted in slow spirals, catching the glow like quiet memories. The air smelled faintly of old books and wood wax, a stillness that held every breath. Judge Sterling's voice carried clear and calm. "The letters will be read into the record." Margaret Donovan had delivered them that morning. 37 envelopes, yellowed and sealed, returned unopened. Thomas's journal followed, its pages worn from years of private anguish. The clerk began, reading in a steady, unhurried tone. "My dearest Harold." No, not Harold. "Thomas, the first letter was from Harper's mother, dated 18 months before her death. It spoke of manifests, classified contracts, photographs taken in secret. It named Damien Voss, Thomas's fiercest rival. It named Isabella, not as an adopted daughter, but as Voss's child, placed in the family by Evelyn to gather secrets for profit. Industrial espionage wrapped in the guise of family." Harper sat motionless. The words landed like slow rain on parched ground. She had known pieces, suspected shadows, but hearing them aloud in this formal room made them real. Her mother had hidden the proof at Crestwood Haven, behind the loose brick beneath the floorboards, in the wall where they once painted together. A final act of protection. A mother's quiet courage against a coming storm she could not outrun. Then came the moment Harper had waited for, without knowing she waited. The clerk described the small oil painting, Harper's mother's hand, discovered pressed into the bedroom wall. A seascape. Simple, tender. On the back, faint pencil marks. A code, a map to the hidden cache. Harper closed her eyes. She saw her mother's brush moving across canvas, humming softly, the way she always did when the world felt too heavy. The painting had been their shared language. Color and light instead of words. Now it had become a key. Isabella sat rigid. Her face drained of color. Connor Reed leaned close, whispering urgently. She shook her head once, small, defeated. The journal entries continued, Thomas's handwriting shaky in places. He had learned the truth 2 years before his death. He had chosen silence to protect the company, the employees, the name. But in the end, he chose truth for Harper. He gave her the house. He gave her the walls. He gave her the chance to decide what forgiveness looked like. The judge's gavel fell once. Soft. Final. Connor rose slowly. "Your Honor, we withdraw the petition." His voice lacked its usual polish. Isabella stared at the floor. Evelyn had already left the room hours earlier, slipping away like smoke. Judge Sterling spoke. "This matter is referred to the Crown Prosecution Service. Miss Isabella Langston, your actions regarding the property and testimony will be investigated." She looked at Harper. "The original will stand. Court is adjourned." The room emptied in murmurs and footsteps. Harper remained seated, the bundle of letters on the table before her. She touched the painting's edge, still wrapped in protective cloth, and felt the faint texture of dried oil beneath her fingertips. Outside the courthouse, the air was warm, scented with blooming lilac from the small garden nearby. Isabella waited on the steps, alone. No blazer today, just a simple dark coat, hair loose for once. She looked smaller. "I didn't know," Isabella said, voice cracking. "Not about my father. Not about any of it. Evelyn, told me stories. I believed them." Harper stood still. The wind moved her hair across her cheek. She looked at the woman who had been her rival, her shadow, her half-sister in name only. Anger rose, then ebbed. In its place came something quieter. Recognition. 2 girls raised in the same house, both shaped by lies they never asked for. "I don't forgive you yet," Harper said gently. "But I see you now." We were both children in that house, both trying to be seen. Isabella's eyes filled. She nodded once, tears slipping free. Harper felt her own eyes burn. They stood there, two women on wide stone steps, the world moving past them. No embrace, no promises, just the shared silence of survivors. Harper turned toward the parking lot. The sun was lowering, painting the sky in soft rose and gold. She carried the painting under her arm, the letters in her bag. She thought of her mother's hands guiding hers across canvas. She thought of her father's final note. "Forgive me." She thought of the house on the cliff, no longer a ruin but a place waiting to hold new stories. She would not hate. She would remember. She would choose kindness where cruelty had been planted. A small breath, a step forward. A year had passed, gentle as the turning of seasons. Crestwood Haven stood renewed under clear summer light, its stone walls softened by fresh white trim and climbing roses that bloomed along the porch. The sea rolled in steady, patient waves below the cliff, whispering the same old lullaby it had sung for generations. Inside, the house breathed again, wood floors polished, windows open to salt air, voices drifting through rooms that had once held only silence. Harper walked the upper hall in soft linen pants and a pale blue blouse, her hair loose for once, catching the breeze. She was 29 now, still slight, still quiet, but something had settled in her eyes. A calm that comes when grief and gratitude learn to share the same space. She carried no cardigan today, the warmth of the house wrapped around her like an old friend. In the studio that had once been her mother's, sunlight poured across the easel. Sofia Rivera stood there, 19, warm tan skin dusted with charcoal, long dark hair tied back in a messy knot. She wore an oversized gray hoodie streaked with old paint, black joggers, and scuffed high-top sneakers. Her hands moved tentatively over canvas, the way someone does when they are afraid their own voice might break if spoken too loudly. Sofia had come to the foundation with a battered portfolio and eyes that expected rejection. Harper had read every page, seen the raw honesty in the lines, and offered her a residency. No fees, no conditions, just space and time. They worked side by side in companionable quiet. The scent of turpentine mingled with sea air. Harper guided Sofia's brush with a light touch, showing her how to layer color so the light felt alive. Then she reached for the small framed painting wrapped in tissue, her mother's seascape, the one that had hidden the truth for so long. She placed it in Sofia's hands. "This was hers," Harper said softly. "She painted it when the world felt too heavy. She taught me that art isn't about perfection. It's about saying what words can't carry." Sofia's fingers trembled as she unwrapped it. She studied the brushstrokes, the way the sea seemed to breathe on canvas. Tears gathered in her eyes. "I never had anyone show me how," she whispered. "My mom left when I was small. I just drew to keep from disappearing." Harper knelt beside her. "You won't disappear here. The real legacy isn't money. It's the chance to find your voice. My mother gave me that. Now I'm giving it to you." Sofia's shoulders shook. She pressed the painting to her chest, tears falling freely. Harper put an arm around her. Not tightly, just enough. They stayed like that for a long minute, two women who had both known what it was to feel unseen. The room held them gently, sunlight pooling on the floorboards, the distant waves a steady heartbeat. Later, Harper stood alone by the wide window overlooking the sea. The foundation had taken shape, a library filled with donated books, art classes for those who could never afford them, writing workshops where quiet voices learned to speak. Most of the Langston fortune was gone, given to literacy programs, shelters, scholarships. She had kept only enough to keep the house alive, to keep the doors open. The rest had become something better. Possibility. She thought of Isabella. The investigation continued, slow and careful. Isabella had not come to the foundation, but a letter had arrived weeks earlier. Simple. Handwritten. No excuses. Just thanks for the truth, and a wish that one day the silence between them might soften. Harper had not replied yet. Forgiveness was not a door she could force open, but she had left space for it. That was enough for now. The sun dipped lower, gilding the water in rose and amber. Harper felt them there. Her mother's quiet presence in the brushstrokes on the walls. Her father's regret made whole in the house itself. They had not been perfect. They had been human. And in their imperfections, they had left her the one thing worth passing on, the courage to choose kindness over bitterness. She smiled. Small, real. She would write it down. Not for fame. For the ones who still felt invisible. A book of small truths, of walls that held secrets and eventually gave them back. The sea kept its rhythm. The house breathed with her. She turned from the window, ready to begin. As the waves continue their gentle rhythm against the cliffs of Crestwood Haven, remember this. Life, like the sea, carries both storms and calm. For many of you watching, perhaps sitting alone in a quiet room, feeling the weight of years, the ache of old joints, the silence where loved ones once filled the space, know that you are not forgotten. Loneliness visits us all. Illness slows the body, yet the heart still holds stories worth telling, love still worth giving. You have lived richly even when the days feel empty now. Your presence, your memories, your quiet courage, they matter. Reach out today. Call a friend, write a letter, share a memory with someone younger. Let your voice be heard again. If this story touched you, please leave a comment below. Tell us one moment from your own life that taught you forgiveness or hope. Share this video with someone who might need it. And if you haven't yet, subscribe so we can keep walking these quiet paths together. May the Lord wrap you in peace, ease your pains, and remind you every morning that you are deeply loved, never truly alone. God bless you, dear friends. Until next time, rest gently.